You don't belong here. Leave." She didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She just looked at him, the way you look at a door that's slightly off its hinges, and said quietly, "Excuse me?" I said, "Leave. This area is restricted. Authorized personnel only." The lobby of Harrogate Medical Center on a Tuesday morning in February looked the way all hospital lobbies look at 7:15. Tired fluorescent light, a volunteer at the information desk sorting pamphlets no one would read, the low mechanical hum of a floor buffer somewhere down a corridor. A few nurses moved past with the focused, unhurried pace of people who had already been there 2 hours. The smell was the usual, antiseptic layered over something vaguely floral, the hospital's attempt at warmth. Grace Okafor was standing near the elevator bank in a gray wool coat, dark trousers, flat boots. She had a canvas tote bag over one shoulder. She was not wearing a lanyard. She was not wearing scrubs. She did not look, to the man now blocking her path, like anyone who needed to be where she was going. His name was Derek Holt. He was 26 years old and had been a security supervisor at Harrogate for 11 months. He had a big frame and an easy confidence in that frame. And he was looking at Grace the way people sometimes look at something that doesn't fit the pattern they've memorized. "I have an appointment," Grace said. "With who?" "With the surgical team. 8th floor." Derek crossed his arms. "You're not on the list." "What list?" "Visitor access list. Nobody clears 8th floor without pre-authorization before 8 a.m. Grace looked at him steadily. She was 43 years old. She had gray beginning at her temples, which she did not color. She had the kind of stillness that comes not from passivity, but from having been in rooms far louder than this one and having learned, over a long time, that composure is not surrender. It is the sharpest thing you own. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor," she said. "I am the supervisor. Then I'd like you to call the 8th floor and confirm." Derek didn't move. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back from the elevators. If you have an authorized appointment, you can check in at the front desk, provide photo ID, and someone will come down to escort you. That's the policy." Have you ever watched someone apply policy the way you'd apply a lock? Not because the situation calls for it, but because the lock is the only power you have? Grace stepped back, not because he told her to, because she was choosing to, and there is a difference, and she knew it even if he didn't. She walked to the front desk. The volunteer, a retired woman named Patricia who had been there 6 years and had seen most things, smiled at her with the particular warmth volunteers reserve for people who look like they need it. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I need someone to call up to OR scheduling on 8 and confirm my appointment. My name is Grace Okafor." Patricia typed something, squinted at the screen, typed again. Then she stopped. She looked then at the screen, then at Grace again. "Dr. Okafor, yes." Patricia's face did something complicated. I'm so sorry, I'll call up right now. But let's go back, because the story of that morning does not begin in that lobby. It begins 6 weeks earlier, in a different city, in a different kind of room entirely. Grace Okafor had been a cardiothoracic surgeon for 14 years. She had trained at the University of Toronto, completed a fellowship at Johns Hopkins, and returned to Canada because that was where she was from. Brampton, north of the city. Her parents both nurses, her mother still living in the house where Grace had learned to read. She had spent the last 9 years at St. Clement's Hospital in Ottawa, where she was chief of cardiac surgery, and for the past 3 years, chair of the House Surgical Standards Committee. She was not famous in the way some doctors become famous. She was not on television. She did not have a book deal. She was known in the way surgeons who are very good at their work become known, which is quietly, and in the right rooms, and among the people who understand what the work actually costs. In January, the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada had appointed her to lead an independent surgical audit at Harrogate Medical Center in Vancouver. There had been 3 post-operative mortality incidents in the cardiac unit over 18 months, each technically within acceptable parameters, each technically explainable. The college did not believe in coincidences. Neither did Grace. The audit was confidential. That was standard. The lead auditor's identity was not disclosed to hospital administration in advance. Also standard. Specifically designed to prevent the kind of careful management of appearances that tends to happen when people know they are being watched. Grace had flown in the night before. She had stayed at a mid-range hotel near the hospital. She had taken the bus that morning because the hotel was 4 blocks away, and she had never owned a car and saw no reason to start. She had arrived at Harrogate at 7:14. Derek Holt had stopped her at 7:16. When the call went up to the 8th floor, it was Dr. Priya Anand who answered. Priya was the head of cardiac surgery at Harrogate, a precise, capable woman in her early 50s who had been preparing for this audit with the controlled anxiety of someone who has done everything right and is still not certain that will be enough. She had been waiting for a call from the college for 2 weeks. She had not been told the auditor's name or arrival date. When Patricia said, "I have a Dr. Grace Okafor at reception asking to come up to 8, Priya went very still. Then she said, "Don't let her leave. I'll be right down." Grace was sitting in a chair near the front desk, her canvas bag on her lap, reading something on her phone when she heard the elevator open. She did not look up immediately. She finished the sentence she was reading. Priya Anand came across the lobby at a pace that was not quite running. Behind her, 2 of her senior residents, both of whom had been pulled from rounds without explanation, and were now watching their chief move across a hospital lobby faster than they had ever seen her move, exchanged a glance. "Dr. Okafor." Priya stopped in front of her. I cannot apologize enough. I had no idea." "It's all right," Grace said. "It is absolutely not all right. You should have been." Priya looked around the lobby, and her gaze found Derek Holt, who was standing near the elevator bank with the expression of a man who is beginning to understand that something is wrong but cannot yet calculate how wrong. "Who stopped you?" Grace said nothing. She stood, shouldered her bag. "Let's go up. I'd like to start with the OR scheduling records from the last 18 months, and then I'll need about an hour with your chief of anesthesia before the first procedure today." Priya blinked. "Of course. Yes, absolutely." She gestured toward the elevators. They walked past Derek Holt. Grace did not look at him. She did not have to. But Priya did, and what Priya looked like in that moment, the particular quality of stillness in her face, was the thing Derek would not be able to stop thinking about for the rest of that day and for many days after. He found out by noon. It was one of the senior nurses, a woman named Constance, who had worked at Harrogate for 22 years and had no patience for unnecessary nonsense, who told him. She didn't frame it as news. She said it the way you state a fact to someone who needs the information. "That woman you stopped this morning? She's the lead auditor from the Royal College. The one reviewing the cardiac department. She has full institutional access as of the moment her appointment was confirmed last month. You stopped a Royal College auditor from entering a building she had legal authority to access." Derek stared at her. Constance looked at him with the expression of someone who has delivered unpleasant facts before. "Administration has been notified. You'll want to speak to HR before 2 o'clock. The thing about Derek Holt was that he was not a bad person. That is worth saying, because the easy story, the satisfying story, would make him a villain. It is easier when they are villains. But he had stopped Grace because of what she looked like, not because of anything she had done, not because of any rule she had broken. She had appeared at the elevator bank in a gray coat and flat boots with a canvas bag, and she had not looked like what he had decided a person needing access to the 8th floor should look like. He had been in that position 11 months. In 11 months, no one had challenged him on a decision. In 11 months, the lobby and its rhythms had arranged themselves into categories he understood. The doctors looked like this, the patients looked like this, the visitors looked like this. He had learned to read the room. He had read it wrong. At 2:15, Derek sat across a desk from Helen Marsh, Harrogate's Director of Human Resources. Helen was 61 and had been doing this job for 19 years. She had a quality common to people who have witnessed a great many avoidable disasters. She did not look surprised by anything, but she looked very tired. She had his incident report in front of her. She had also, Derek noticed, a second document, thicker, stapled. "Walk me through this morning," Helen said. He did. He told it plainly, because he had decided on the bus coming in that if he was going to survive this, he was going to tell the truth. And the truth was that he had stopped a woman who looked like she didn't belong, and he had not called up to confirm her appointment before doing so because he had already decided she didn't belong. Helen listened without expression. When he finished, she said, "Dr. Okafor is here on a confidential appointment from the Royal College." You are correct that she did not have her name on the pre-authorized visitor list, because her appointment is deliberately not pre-disclosed to administration. That is standard practice for auditors of her kind. She has a federal letter of access that supersedes all institutional clearance requirements, which she was prepared to show you had you asked her for identification. She didn't show it. You didn't ask for it. You told her to step away from the elevators. Helen set down the report. There's also a broader concern. You stopped Dr. Okafor and not the two individuals who arrived at that elevator bank after her, both of whom were also not wearing lanyards, both of whom were also not on the pre-authorized visitor list. Derek was quiet. One of those individuals was a pharmaceutical sales representative. The other was a man who had mistaken Harrogate for St. Joseph's 2 blocks over. Neither of them was stopped. Dr. Okafor was. Helen looked at him. She was not unkind. She was also not pretending. I think you understand what I'm saying. Derek looked at his hands. Yes, he said. By mid-afternoon, the 8th floor knew. By late afternoon, the story had moved through the hospital the way stories move through hospitals, which is to say quickly, with a few mutations, but the core fact intact. A woman in a gray coat had been stopped in the lobby, and that woman had turned out to be the person now sitting in the cardiac unit's conference room with 18 months of surgical records and a mandate from the Royal College. Dr. Anand came to find Grace at 4:30. Grace was at the conference room table, reading, a cup of tea gone cold beside her. I wanted to check in, Priya said, and to apologize again. Properly. Grace looked up. You don't need to keep apologizing for something that wasn't your doing. It happened in my hospital. It happens in every hospital. Grace said this simply, without accusation. Have you ever been stopped? Priya sat down. Once. At a conference in Montreal. The registration desk assumed I was there for the nursing track. A pause. I was the keynote. Grace smiled. Small, tired, real. I've been stopped in this building before. Different building, same coat, different year. I've learned to carry the letter. She paused. I didn't show it this morning because I shouldn't have to. Priya was quiet for a moment. No, you shouldn't. The audit took 4 days. Grace worked methodically, the way she always worked. Not rushed, not performative, not punishing. She interviewed staff without announcing what she was looking for. She reviewed the 3 mortality files with the care of someone who understood that care was owed not to the institution, but to the patients who had not survived it. On the 4th day, she met with the full cardiac unit leadership for 3 hours. She was measured and precise, and she did not soften what she had found, but she also did not weaponize it. This was the part of the work that most people never saw. The part that was not about finding fault, but about understanding a system well enough to make it safer, and caring enough about that goal to say the uncomfortable things out loud. At the end of that meeting, the senior cardiologist, a man named Raymond Galt, who had been at Harrogate 30 years and had, in those 30 years, not often been in a position of being assessed, said, I want to say something, not about the audit, about Monday. Grace looked at him. I heard what happened in the lobby. I should have ensured your access was properly managed from the moment your appointment was confirmed. That failure was administrative, and it was mine. I'm sorry. Grace accepted this. She was not one of those people who waves off apologies to make the other person feel better. She took them seriously, which is a form of respect. Thank you, she said. What happened to Derek Holt was this. He was not fired. That detail matters. He was placed on a 2-week review, during which he was required to complete updated training in equitable access procedures and unconscious bias recognition. He was required to write a formal written acknowledgement of the incident, not as a performance but as a record. His supervisor was required to conduct a broader review of whether the lobby clearance protocols as a whole were being applied equitably. Because the problem was not only Derek, the problem was a system that had let this happen before and would let it happen again unless someone looked at the whole structure, not just the most recent example. Helen Marsh sent a summary of the review to the hospital's equity officer. She also noted, in that summary, that Derek had been forthcoming in his account, had not deflected, and had said, without prompting, I made an assumption I shouldn't have made, and I need to understand why I made it. That mattered. It did not fix what had happened. It mattered anyway. Grace flew back to Ottawa on Thursday evening. She sat in the window seat with her tote bag under the seat in front of her and the audit report on her laptop, which she would submit to the Royal College by Friday morning. The city of Vancouver went dark beneath the plane, the lights stringing out along the coast. She thought about something Priya had said on the second morning of the audit, in passing, in the hallway, while they were both holding coffee cups and waiting for a resident to unlock a file room. "Do you ever get tired of it?" Grace had known what she meant without asking. "Yes," she'd said. "How do you keep going?" Grace had thought about it, not because she didn't have an answer, but because she wanted to give an honest one. Because the work is real. Because what I'm here to do is real. And because every time someone tries to decide who I am before I've walked through the door, she'd paused. They're wrong, and eventually the room finds out. The clerk at the hotel had called her Miss when she checked in. The security officer had called her Ma'am when he turned her away. The surgical team on the 8th floor by Tuesday afternoon was calling her Dr. Okafor, the same woman, the same gray coat, the same flat boots and canvas bag. The room had found out. There is something that happens in institutions, hospitals, law firms, government buildings, any place where hierarchy has calcified into assumption, where the question of who belongs somewhere gets answered before anyone has asked it properly. It gets answered by a canvas bag instead of a briefcase, by flat boots instead of heels, by a face that doesn't match the face in someone's head when they imagine who holds authority. Grace Okafor had spent 20 years walking through doors that someone, somewhere, had briefly considered closing. She had spent 20 years being the most qualified person in a room that hadn't expected her to be there. She had not spent those years being angry. She had spent them being good at the work, which is its own kind of answer, and its own kind of refusal. The Royal College released their report on Harrogate's cardiac unit 6 weeks later. The report identified systemic issues in post-operative monitoring protocols and recommended specific structural changes. It also, in its opening section, commended the unit's leadership for what it called transparent cooperation with the audit process. Priya Anand read that section twice. Across the city in a different kind of room, a man was finishing a training module on a computer screen. He was 26. He had a long career ahead of him, and it could go more than one way. He reached the end of the module. There was a reflection prompt at the bottom of the last page. It said, "Think of a moment when you made an assumption about someone based on appearance. What did you assume, and what did you miss?" Derek Holt sat with that question for a long time before he started typing. So here is what I want to leave you with before you go. Grace Okafor didn't need the world to see her that morning. She didn't need Derek Holt to understand who she was. She already knew. She had always known. But here's what I keep thinking about. How many times does this happen in a lobby, in a waiting room, in a hallway, to someone who is not a Royal College auditor, to someone who doesn't have the letter in their bag, to someone who is turned away, and the room never finds out, because those people are out there too, and they deserve the same thing Grace deserved, not after the reveal, not after the credentials are confirmed, but before, at the door, on arrival. Just because they're people and they're there and they came. If this story made you think about who gets the benefit of the doubt and who has to earn it, leave a comment below. I want to know what you think, and if you've ever been the person in the gray coat, standing at that elevator bank, knowing exactly who you are while someone else decides you don't belong. This one's for you. Like this video if it moved you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Velvet Honor, because we're going to keep telling stories that matter, one door at a time.